I am blown away at the number of, I mean, Dave and Russell, thousands of DMs that I've gotten, and who am I, about people just saying, I've never had, faith strong enough to talk about out loud. I've never read the Bible. It is driving me to do that. So yes, there's going to be this, but first I get chills talking about this because I've never seen privately or publicly so many people refer to God.
Someone said to me the other day, someone came up to me at the airport and said, Dave, you ran turning point, but this might be a tipping point. And I thought that was, I thought that was pretty.
When I first met him at that RNC, and like I've just become Christian, like a couple of months, I'm all bewildered, and I was reading, like I'm reading the Bible in 1 year, and so I was in the book of Romans, and he was like, so what are you asking me about my Christianity? And I'm like, yeah, I'm in the book of Romans. He's like, well, that's the Constitution, that's the Christian Constitution, and I was like, oh, like thought about that when I was reading it and stuff.
This is Actual Friends, and I must say that this week I am very happy to be with actual friends Sage Steele and Russell Brand. Obviously, we don't really need a rundown for a show like this. We all know what's going on here. Unfortunately, Sage was not with us last week, having gotten married only barely 2 weeks ago, which was so profoundly wonderful and such an incredible celebration of love. And I was so honored to be there. It was just great. And then obviously a few days later, the world has just changed clearly for the worse. Russell and I were on air doing the show when we found out that Charlie had been shot. We did not know that he was dead yet, although it did not look good. And we were kind of just working through it in real time. And I guess, guys, maybe the best way to kick off the show today is because we do this for a living, because we talk about all these things, and then we end up knowing these people. And we are these people in some sense. It's hard to, as I said to you last week, Russell, it's like almost like we're narrating the end of the world that we're all part of. It's something like that. And it's been really challenging for me. I'm really trying hard to level up and do this with as much honesty and true emotion as possible. But it gets really complicated. Sage, why don't I start with you, because you weren't here last week, and you do lead with emotion, which is one of the reasons I love you. And I know you're always trying to, you always think it's like a weakness that you have or something, but like, I think it's great. And I think it's why people love you so much. There's almost just no way to do this properly, right? Talk about what's happening right now to really do it right.
Yeah, no, you're right. And thank you for saying that. I think if we don't show some semblance of emotion over this, even if we didn't know Charlie, and all of us here did, there's something lacking in you as a human being, in your soul, is just my personal opinion. I was on my honeymoon and had a very different mentality when all this happened. And needless to say, the honeymoon completely changed. And I went to work, so to speak, because I wanted to, because I wanted to try to remember a man that has profoundly changed me. There's a lot of negativity that we're going to talk about on today's show. What I will say is, for me, the overwhelming, beautiful messages, comments about Charlie, his family, people coming now to the forefront to talk about how much he changed them from afar, from sometimes thousands of miles away, just on YouTube watching his clips. I do continue forward with positivity and with hope and optimism that something this disgusting and incomprehensible and wrong can have an incredible impact. Kind of like what Erica Kirk said in her absolutely unforgettable and incredible comments on Friday night. So I'm glad we're going to get into all of it, because we have to. We can't just focus on, hey, we're going to be better, stronger. We have to go deeper into it. And that's what we love to do on this show in general. And that's what we have to continue to do if we're going to move forward and be better.
Yeah. And, we're going to show a clip in a second of a Fox and Friends hit that I did on Friday morning. I was in New York. I was only there because Thursday was the memorial of 9/11. So I was in New York for that. I was in New York during 9/11. My dad actually saw the second plane hit. I had a cousin who was a firefighter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was in New York for that. And then it was insane because I'm at the 9/11 museum with the Cantor Fitzgerald people who lost 650 some odd employees. I mean, just absolute unimaginable horror. And in some sense, this almost sounds crazy, but it felt kind of small relative to Charlie. And some of the memorial, they were Howard Lutnick, who was running Cantor Fitzgerald, who's now in the Trump cabinet. He was talking, and he started talking about Charlie at the 9/11 memorial. I thought, man, this thing is huge. Russell, it feels to me it has like a stickiness that most things don't have anymore. That, we just go from story to story. Last week, everyone was focused on the Charlotte murder, which was horrific, the light rail murder. We're gone with that now, but this thing feels like it's going to stick and maybe fundamentally change the country.
Yeah, I think you're right. And thank you at the beginning covering the fact that there'll be a lack of objectivity because of various degrees of personal connection, whether it's sort of professionally or personally with Charlie. But I think, yes, even just a week later, it's fascinating to look at its impact. I've spoken to numerous people who didn't know who Charlie Kirk was prior to his death that are now trying to understand why this is so significant. Of course, it's the first political murder of its type, sort of a significant American public figure since the 1960s in your country. And I think it's even though Charlie Kirk, there was so much about him that was traditional and literally conservative and Christian, obviously, and of course, he was also a modern phenomenon in terms of what he did for a living and how he mobilized people and how he performed. And so we've got this is a unique event, Dave, and I think the sort of as you say, the viscosity of the event is because people are starting to recognize in the way that perhaps they did with the impact on various elections, whether it's Brexit or Trump, the first Trump election. What is this significance? And so we're going to be dealing with, of course, people exploiting the death, people not honoring the death. And in a way, isn't it extraordinary, your point about 9/11, that in a sense it's part of a continuum, because how was 9/11 used and exploited? What did we learn from 9/11? How did it as an object? There's like I was sort of saying today, actually, Dave, that there's the actuality of Charlie Kirk's death, a man who's a father and a husband, and like almost I can't think about that side of it. It's sort of
Right.
But then there's this object now, Charlie Kirk, the object, murdered Charlie Kirk as an object. How is that being dissected, used, exploited? And I think that's already super revealing.
Guys, when I first started this podcast, I felt like I had to figure out everything myself: scripts, schedules, branding, even the tech setup. That's why I wish I had Shopify back then, because Shopify is like having a business partner who already knows the ropes. Shopify is the commerce platform powering millions of businesses worldwide. 10% of all U.S. e-commerce runs on it. From household names to new brands just starting out, Shopify helps you turn your big idea into a real business. Build a stunning online store with hundreds of ready-to-go templates. Speed up your workflow with AI tools that write product descriptions, headlines, and even polish your product photography. And when it's time to grow, Shopify makes marketing simple. Create email blasts or social posts that reach your customers wherever they're scrolling. Best of all, Shopify takes care of the hard stuff too: inventory, shipping, returns, you name it. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Rubin. That's shopify.com/Rubin. So let me throw to this clip. This is from Fox and Friends on Friday morning, about 7 a.m. I had woke up about 15 minutes before. And just like you guys, we do all these TV shows. It becomes kind of old hat. You don't have to think about it that much. You tell people what you think, that's it. But as I was walking 10 blocks at 6:30 a.m. through New York City, I really was like, I knew I was going to be on TV all day. And I was like, I have no idea how I can do this properly, like actually emote properly, but tell people really what I think, and also not become part of the circus and everything else. Here I am sitting down with Lawrence Jones. I mean, this is an unimaginable tragedy, not only for guys like you and I who knew him, but for the country. What Charlie did consistently, better than anyone, and I literally mean that, in the United States of America, was talk to the other side. We know how tough it is, right? We're in the media biz. We try to reach out to these guys, and it can be very difficult to do that. I'm a former lefty. That's what brought Charlie and I together, right? I was leaving the left, and Charlie and I were debating. We would debate abortion. We'd debate marriage equality, death penalty, taxes, healthcare, the entire thing, and we would do it on stage together. And even though we had huge disagreements, which over the years, thanks to Charlie,
I actually evolved quite a bit, and our differences got much smaller, much narrower. But it was always respectful. There was a hug at the end. We broke bread many times.
So, guys, the thing that maybe we should focus on a little bit is that Charlie represented the ability to talk to both sides. We all talk to people for a living. It's become increasingly difficult to do that. And my fear right now is that after a couple days of mourning, it's just going to go completely the other way. What do you think about that, Sage?
When you say go completely the other way, what do you mean?
Meaning that the anger emotion and going off into our own sides is going to take over. We're already starting to see some of that on Twitter, which we can get into or not. But I feel like there was a couple days, it was very brief, maybe 3 days of like everyone was kind of like, okay, wow, this man has died. This is horrific. And now it's starting to veer into the, okay, how do we use this for our own political purposes part? And that's the thing that ends up always dividing us.
Yeah, no, listen, it does kind of feel like that right now. And it does tend to happen, it seems, every single time something like this happens. When you go back a week and a half ago to the situation in Charlotte with the young woman, and immediately it's the horror, it's the emotion, it's the tears, and then it's the pointing of fingers. And that is absolutely from both sides. I do feel that you guys tell me what you think. Is there one difference with this where I have never, ever noticed as many people talking about God and faith this time after a tragedy? Maybe if
Yeah.
you go back 24 years to 9/11, but never, ever
No,
before.
I think more now. I think more now. That was
Sure.
very political. That was very
It
political.
was, and rightfully so, immediately.
Yeah,
And this is obviously political for
yeah,
all these networks and people who are like, well, we don't know the motive and
yeah. Well,
shut up. Like, I can't even do that. Just let's be freaking honest for once. But I am blown away at the number of, I mean, Dave and Russell, thousands of DMs that I've gone, and who am I, about people just saying, I've never had, faith strong enough to talk about out loud. I've never read the Bible. It is driving me to do that. So yes, there's going to be this, but first I get chills talking about this because I've never seen privately or publicly so many people refer to God and their faith after something so maybe it's because we've actually never seen anything like this on live TV. It came this close with Donald Trump. He was on live TV when that happened last July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania, too. But to see this to a young man, I feel like it has turned, it is a turning point. It actually is. And so maybe that's why there's going to be this, but the good people are going to shout down some of that ugliness. And hopefully that's what ends up being their pervasive thought. Am I too
no,
optimistic to think that?
Russell, I want you to jump in here, but real quick, because you mentioned turning point. Someone said to me the other day, someone came up to me at the airport and said, Dave, you ran turning point, but this might be a tipping point. And I thought that was, I thought that was pretty good. I don't know if they meant it purely in the political sense, or maybe they did mean it in the spiritual sense that you're talking about. But
Oh,
Russell, I mean, it's like, I don't know that we're to the silver lining part of this, but as someone that publicly talks about their faith an awful lot and has had their own evolution, let's say here, I mean, you must be feeling somewhat, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, validated or affirmed that some of the things that you care about are kind of scaling up.
Where I don't know where else you would go, actually, is why. I don't know, other than Christ, where one can turn, not just because of the extent of the tragedy, because of course what many of the people that look to exploit it from an oppositional perspective will say is, well, who cares about this when there's these deaths that are connected to my perspective or my political point of view. And when you see in a short period of time JD Vance say that, appear to say, along with Pam Bondi, that this legitimizes a rescinding of many of the previous positions of the right when it comes to free speech and free expression.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech.
So when you see someone celebrating Charlie's murder, call them out. And hell, call their employer. We don't believe in political violence, but we do believe in civility.
That's horrific. It's free speech, but you shouldn't be employed anywhere if you're going to say that.
I feel a kind of a concern although I understand it, when you see something like my countryman Bob Villan, who you may have heard of because when he was at Glastonbury, he said some pretty intense things about Israel, and I reckon that would have been on your radar, particularly Dave. But he said some stuff that I actually gasped. I didn't think I was at that point in my life where I would go. Like he said, like some such derogatory things about Charlie Kirk, God rest his soul.
Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, you piece of shit.
Then I remembered me on September the 12th, 2001, while I was an MTV presenter in the UK, dressing up as Osama bin Laden, going to work that day. And I wasn't, I was a drug addict, and so obviously literally not in my right mind, but it was like I couldn't handle the scale of what had happened. And as a little show off, I wanted to kind of be close to it and understand it. And I already knew about Osama bin Laden, and I couldn't believe that something that was on my radar had such extraordinary consequences. And I can't deal with Bob Villan doing that, or J.D. Vance and Pam Bondi sort of saying that maybe hate speech is a thing and you should snitch on people if they say desecratory or disrespectful things about Charlie Kirk, although I can understand the outrage. I can understand why people would even say things about Charlie Kirk that are disrespectful and disgusting, and the only path I can walk through now is with Jesus. Like that, immediately forgive Bob Villan for saying that. That's what I reckon Charlie Kirk would be down with. Certainly that's what Christ would be down with. I understand why people now might change their positions on free speech because that too, it requires compassion. I don't see how from a political, rational, philosophical perspective you can navigate not only the death of Charlie Kirk but the subsequent reaction without Christ. And that's why I'm fascinated, although I'm not certain. I just have the certainty that comes from surrendering to him.
Well, I don't know if you guys saw my tweet about this a couple of days ago, but, Charlie, over the last couple of years, he was also starting to celebrate Shabbat, the Jewish Sabbath, obviously starting on Friday night sundown into Saturday night sundown. And I tweeted out, we've been trying to do that a bit more around my house and really get offline for that period of time and everything else. But I've committed to myself, and I fully will keep it up, that we will now keep that in my house. Going forward, that's something I can do. It's for Charlie in some sense, but I think it's something that we all could do. Charlie obviously was not Jewish, but he was keeping the Jewish Sabbath, which certainly would be in line with all of his other religious values.
But Dave, let me ask you real quick, because what for you and for David is it about what happened that is making you say, okay, this is the turning point in my life at home as a father that makes you now want to implement this?
Well, we've been coming around to some of those things just by the nature of being parents now, where then, as a mother of three, like then you start realizing some of the things that came before you and the traditions that came before you and the beliefs and all the things that set you up, hopefully, to have a good life. So we've been trying to do a little bit more of that in general, but I saw somebody tweet the video where Charlie talks about why he keeps the Jewish Sabbath. And I just thought it was so wonderfully said, with all of the goodness that people are now coming around to realize Charlie was about, that I thought, man, like I'd be giving something to him in a sense, but it's really giving it to myself. And it's the easiest thing to do. And as you guys know, I mean, I had a running joke with Shapiro for the last 10 years. I take August off and he always goes, Dave, you take 30 days off, but we have 1 day a week we're supposed to do it. So it's like, it's actually an easy thing to do in some sense. So that's nice. If you or a loved one are on Medicare or turning 65 soon, you need to hear this. Medicare enrollment is complicated and misinformation is everywhere. The more confused you are, the easier it is for scammers to push you into overpriced plans that make them money while pretending they're unbiased. In fact, Trump's Department of Justice recently sued 3 of the biggest Medicare brokers in America for allegedly doing exactly that. And the victims? Everyday Americans like you. That's why I trust Chapter. Chapter's advisors make Medicare simple and always put you first. They listen carefully, compare every plan, and help you find the most savings. On average, they save people $1,100. And here's the best part. They'll never push you towards one plan over another. If you're already on the right plan, they'll tell you honestly instead of trying to switch you for their own gain. So take control of your Medicare coverage with guidance you can trust. Call Chapter today at 332-867-0207. Most people say they wish they'd called sooner. But Sage, let me throw to this other clip which you referenced a moment ago. So this is CNN, where there is this desire now to not make it political because it appears to be political in the direction that they do not want it to be political. And here is, it's Montel Williams starting, Scott Jennings, who you just had on your podcast, finishing. Take a look.
Talking about a love-torn child, a kid. This is probably his first real relationship, and somebody was disparaging the person that he loved. He sat on that building for 30 minutes before he took the shot. Why did he wait until the first word trans came up? Then he took the shot.
You think he heard it? He could hear it?
I think he could hear it. I think he also, I don't believe he was motivated politically. I think this was motivated emotionally.
Guys, the evidence here is overwhelming. He said, Charlie Kirk, I can't stand this hate anymore. I'm going to take him out. The testimony from him and the statements of his family, he had become more left-wing. He etched the statements that are made by the left about Republicans and conservatives and Charlie Kirk fascist on the bullet casings.
He made a joke about it in his last text.
Well, it doesn't sound like a joke to me because someone's dead and about to be buried.
Well,
so it doesn't sound like a joke to me. So I'm just telling you, there was an effort all weekend long on the left to try to make this guy sound like he was a conservative. That failed. That was passed around all over the weekend. That has now failed. The evidence has now come out. He was motivated by hate. He was motivated by left-wing radicalism. He got mixed up with some trans ideology in his life. We'll learn more about that, I'm sure, when more evidence and testimony comes out. We are looking around the edges of this for something other than what's staring us in the face. Left-wing radicalism got this kid. He went up to a roof and he murdered our friend, and that's what happened.
All right, so you guys know Scott always does a bang-up job cleaning up the mess that these guys put out there. Montel Williams, just as a sidebar, you guys know that he was once dating Kamala Harris, just as a complete, like, how the hell do these worlds...
I forgot about
that these worlds just collide in weird ways. But Russell, the point that Montel started with, and I can see he's trying to lead with empathy. So I'm not going to try. I'm going to try not to mock him here, but he says something kind of insane. He basically says this was not motivated politically. It was motivated emotionally. But the emotion that motivated him to kill was because of the purported political beliefs that Russell had. So it strikes me as just, why are you trying to confuse the issue here? He was dating apparently this trans person, or it was his roommate or lover or whatever it is, and he killed Charlie because of what he believed Charlie's position on these issues were. If that's not political, then what the high hell is political?
I think that, that's some extraordinary sophistry from Montel Williams there that he would evidently have to deploy when thinking about his dating history as well. He must do a rationalize guy. But I didn't know that. It's very difficult, I would say, to form a cleavage between that guy's reported romantic life and the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I don't know why you would want to. It's clearly a factor. And even saying it's emotionally motivated rather than politically, as if emotion and politics are separate categories. They're not separate categories. Anyway, I saw that clip before, but I didn't see Scott Jennings' response, and I was actually somewhat see how Scott Jennings handled it, because that was a galling piece of casuistry from Montel Williams there.
Sage, what do we do about the both sides of this thing? That's been the thing that when I have been talking about the political part, even though I've been trying to talk about the emotional part, that's the part that I'm really trying to draw the line in the sand on. This thing where they're all getting up there now and saying, well, so first off, they try to confuse you. It's about emotions, and this was a love story, basically. But the other part is the both sides thing, that somehow both sides are equally guilty, which just as like a notion is nonsense. Things are not equal. Right and left are not equal. It doesn't necessarily mean one is inherently better than the other. But to just be like, okay, well, both sides do it, it's a 50-50 thing. It's like the most low resolution thinking you could possibly come up with.
I do want to add that, it's one thing for analysts, not that Montel Williams is an analyst, but guests to come on and say things and you kind of go, okay, fine. When the journalists in the room, and I use that term lightly these days.
The
Caitlin Collins come on and is arguing incessantly with Senator Ted Cruz the other day and saying, well, we don't know that it's politically motivated. I think, you know what, I guess they just continue to stomp on their own graves because as journalism we know has been dead now for a long time, and the mainstream media, people like Caitlin Collins, continue to cement that, unfortunately. If only they would just tell the truth, which is kind of obvious here, fine, still say alleged about the alleged assassin, fine, do all those journalistic things, but at the end of the day, when we know for a fact that those certain terms, fascist, etc., were written on the bullets and on the casings, then we don't have to pretend anymore. To me, I think one of the problems, one of the reasons why we got in this position in the first place is because so many people who are center to center right and a little bit more conservative, because I was one of these people that stayed quiet. And unfortunately, what we did is we allowed the microphone, all the platforms to go to just one side, one ideology. And for on TikTok, on every single platform. And it's like, okay, just stay quiet, just do it to keep your job. And what that did is that only allowed certain ideologies, many like this, to go into the heads of these young kids. And so now, I'm not saying that's the only thing to point your finger at, but when everyone else stays quiet, just because it's scary and it's easier, and you're trying to be more peaceful in many ways and not stir the pot and not debate more, then the other possibilities, the other opinions are never heard on these platforms. And so to me, that is one thing that we absolutely must do, along with, in my opinion, and personally for me, getting on my knees even more and praying and leading with God, but also to not live in fear. And you've got to speak up so our kids can at least hear both sides and come up with their own opinions, and not only hear that Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk and everybody on the right is a fascist and a Nazi. So I think we do have to take some responsibility there, because the silence in many ways is compliance, and the silence then from both sides, one side in particular, allows so many people to believe what they're hearing from this ugliness, and it's devastating. We can no longer afford to be silent. We just have to do it differently. And I think that we already are. When you look at the response to it, there are no cities burning down. There are no riots. None of that is happening, unlike the summer of love in 2020. If this were reversed, and I know I shouldn't do that.
No, of course. No, but it's the truth.
We've seen it historically, and we can no longer afford to be silent, but we must do it better.
So to that point, we're going to toss away the last clip that I was going to throw to you. I want to ask you something else, because you were just making me think something, Sage. Do you think in some sense, the three of us are roughly the same age, and we grew up in a time where it was not cool to be racist. It was not cool to hate gays. It was not like we were so post much of the craziness that in some sense, there's no one out there, and I include us in this, that can actually really speak to what a kid who's, say, between 12 and like 19 is really going through right now. When you think of COVID and you think of TikTok and the access to all of the shit they have on their phone, and how their parents locked them in their bedroom because of COVID, and the government lied to them, and all of the other stuff that we always talk about, in some sense, there's no way to actually analyze the psychological condition of an 18-year-old kid who, by all accounts, came from a decent family, two parents, blah, 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 ends up in this ideology, this queer trans ideology or whatever, and then murders someone for it. It's almost impossible for us, because we didn't grow up in a time where we were being told the world was going to end because of climate change tomorrow. Everything was systemically racist. Your genitals don't match. So we've basically given them this horrific poison and then said to them, good luck with all of that. Russell, did that make any sense?
Yeah, it made good sense, actually. First time I sort of heard that argument, that what was created was a global laboratory where people were subject to unprecedented conditions. And you're right. I mean, even myself, I can't conceive of how, if your driving ideology was that people's individual identity is the most important thing about them, and if they want to subvert even their anatomical appearance in order to convene more closely with their spiritual identity, I still don't know how you get to, and then therefore I'm going to shoot Charlie Kirk. That's still kind of crazy. But what is, I think, really interesting about what we've just said is that we don't know the repercussions of that extraordinary and deceptive time. That too, like something you mentioned, Sage, had a brief window at the beginning of COVID where we're all like, oh, well, we're all in this together. We better like help one another because life is safe. Life is important. We all have to protect one another. Then that went, and it became about sort of mistrust and hatred and division. Yeah, we're gonna maybe a peculiar incubation period of hysteria was created, and I think that's a really interesting set of connections that you've made. Yeah.
If you're stressed about back taxes, maybe you missed the April deadline or your books are a mess, don't wait. The IRS is cracking down and penalties add up fast. 5% per month, up to 25% just for not filing. But there's help. Tax Network USA can take the burden off your shoulders and stop the spiral before it gets worse. They've helped thousands of Americans, employees, small business owners, even people who haven't filed in years. Messy books, no problem. They've seen it all and they know exactly how to clean it up. With direct access to powerful IRS programs and expert negotiators on your side, Tax Network USA knows how to win. You'll start with a free consultation, and if you qualify, they may even be able to reduce or eliminate what you owe. They'll also help protect you from wage garnishments and bank levies. So don't wait for the next IRS letter to show up in your mailbox. Take action now. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Dave to talk to a real expert at Tax Network USA. That's 1-800-958-1000 or tnusa.com/Dave. Take the pressure off and let Tax Network USA handle your tax issues.
Hey, Dave and Russell. I mean, you guys know the ages of my kids, 19, 21, and 23. The younger two are still in college. So subtract 5 years, and we were in the thick of things during COVID when we were shut down, living in the Northeast, which was completely insane. And I can tell you as a mother, I felt like long before what happened last week, I felt like I had failed in many ways because I almost had to give up and allow my kids to go on their devices more because that was the only social interaction they were allowed to have. They weren't allowed to go to school. They weren't allowed to participate in sports. And so all they had was this. And I saw it. And all of a sudden you see, these inappropriate dance moves and everybody's doing TikTok dances. But guess what? They were really smart and they kept pushing more after that in the ideology. And so my kids were on a group text constantly. And before Charlie Kirk, before this happened last week, I mean, we were constantly going back and forth. I'm like, Mom, well, what about this? And I saw Donald Trump said this. And Mom, what do you think about this? And Mom, really? Are you sure, Mom? Are you sure? Because they only saw one thing. It has been a battle I can't even describe over the last several years to say, okay, guys, but you can't just get your news from TikTok. And fortunately, I feel like I've made up a little bit for what I felt was a failure back during COVID when we're locked down, but I still had to go to work every day. I couldn't monitor. I couldn't babysit everything that was coming onto their phones and their laptops. And so the conversations have been incredible because they're mature enough to listen to me now and not think I'm the devil because I would, make them make their beds and clean up after themselves. But they realized they were only getting their news from one source. And this happened last week. And my kids asked for a FaceTime with me, which never happens, the three of them who say, Mom, we need you. Number one, they're scared. They're like, Mom, please no more. Please don't go speak. Please don't go anywhere. Don't go near a college campus. It's not worth it, Mom. We love you, but please don't. We're all four crying on the phone. And number two, to truly make an effort, my oldest already has, to listen to all different kinds of platforms, not just one. And the younger two are now. But that's only because I've been choking them and saying, you guys, you can't just take it in from there. It is incumbent upon the parents. It's not too late. For some, obviously, the damage has been done and we have to pray for those people. But as parents, we have to continue to make sure that they are not getting everything from just one source. It is evil what has been put out there. And I don't know that anyone who's being honest with themselves can deny that based just on the last week. And since then, and the reactions on college campuses of so many kids laughing and stomping on the grave of Charlie Kirk, so to speak. So we have a huge job to do. And I'm heartbroken. For this generation that we have done this to.
Well, Sage, let me give you a little public credit here because I spent a lot of time at the wedding with all three of your kids, and those are mature, bright, fun, happy, loving human beings. So I know you know that, but it's very true. And Russell, real quick before I hand it off to you guys, to your point also about the hysteria, so let's say you really thought Charlie was the worst of all things, like actually whatever that means. If your answer was, okay, I have a trans lover, and to stop Charlie, I must kill him. Well, now look at the fruits of what you've done. Tyler Robinson may die by firing squad because they have death penalty in Utah, but one way or another, his life is over. His functioning life is over. And the partner, lover, whatever you want to call him, his life is over too. So if the idea was, I'm going to assassinate someone so we can live a happy life, it's like, that's the total reverse of what you did. So there's just so many layers here. Who am I throwing to now?
Me, I think.
Take it over, Russell.
Marshall McLuhan, the Canadian, I think, cultural analyst and philosopher, coined the famous phrase, the medium is the message. I think coined to explain that if mass media is controlled by a few individuals, the messaging you're receiving is likely the agenda of those few individuals. We all know that MSNBC, CNN, the BBC ultimately represent a handful of views when it comes to global imperialism, the power of the state, partnerships between commerce and deep state bureaucracies that amount to the nullification of democracy as we understand it. If the medium really is the message, these days media has changed radically, and Charlie Kirk is perhaps a martyr not just for Christianity or republicanism or conservatism, but for this new form of media where everybody can have a voice. Maybe it's a free market ideology where the best messaging will succeed, but maybe there are other factors too. Certainly Sage just expressed her concerns about her own young adult children receiving a good amount of their information from TikTok and from other short form platforms. In the United Kingdom, there is division. For a brief moment this weekend, there appeared to be something resembling unity because the nationalist marches led by Tommy Robinson seemed to be very, very successful and to go off almost without a hitch. We had a reporter there ourselves, and I believe we have some coverage of that march now. It was a very well attended march. My friend Joe went, and he said that it was jubilant in the main. There was some solemnity, and there was a celebration and honoring of Charlie Kirk was part of it. What perhaps fascinated me most of all, it was that the counter protests seemed pallid, listless, pale and awful, even for a kind of Antifa-inspired movement, masked denizens of basements everywhere that wouldn't show their faces and couldn't really show their colors. What's fascinating is Elon Musk appeared and spoke at that march, but via satellite or via some kind of link up, of course. And what's interesting is between Elon Musk and Tommy Robinson, you have perhaps in a way comparable to the certainly to the posthumous impact of Charlie Kirk, in that Tommy Robinson is persona non grata in the UK. He's been jailed, he's been banned, he would be cancelled into oblivion were it not for the fact that Elon Musk has taken an interest, in particular around his reporting about rape gangs in the United Kingdom, and has reposted a lot of Tommy Robinson content. So now you have a robust nationalist movement that's entirely outside of state-sanctioned centralized control. And even those people on the left that were in attendance are in agreement with the majority of those marchers on one thing: Keir Starmer and the current UK government are in total failure and near collapse. Here, I think, is some of Elon Musk's conversation with Tommy Robinson. And I really want to hear what both of you think about what this means, particularly in the light of Charlie Kirk's death, for new politics, i.e. someone that is outside of the British political system, Elon Musk, who's essentially now, at least in this role, a magnate for media and communications, and a marginal peripheral and, in some quarters, despised figure like Tommy Robinson are able to create and generate this kind of interest What does it say about the British government? What does it say about media and communications? And what does it say about the future of the UK? Let's have a look at the Elon Musk clip, I think it is.
The government can obviously use whatever powers are available to suppress the people. And so I really think there's got to be a change of government in Britain. And you can't, we don't have another 4 years or whatever the next election is. It's too long. There's genuine risk of rape and murder and the destruction of the country and dissolution of the entire way of life. If you weren't under a massive attack, then people should go about their business and just live their lives. But unfortunately, if the fight comes to you, you don't have a choice. So you have to rally all of the people of Britain to fight for the future.
Let me ask
and
you,
if this doesn't happen, there won't be a future.
Are you ready to fight for your future, Britain?
Fight for your future. Do it. Go.
Will we be gagged any longer, Britain?
Well, there you go. A bit of jingoism and excitement there. And Elon doing his excited persona, which is always brings some very particular feelings to the forefront for me. God love him, that glorious and magnificent nerd. Dave, what do you think about that movement? And do you see that turning into real political collateral? And what do you think it indicates about the UK, mate?
Well, Russell, you asked 3 questions, right, when you threw into that. I had to write them all down because you say a lot of things per sentence. So first, as for the British government, the British government is completely screwed. Keir Starmer, I don't know. Look, I know I'm in my own bubble, as we all are. I don't know anyone that supports the guy. You're right. Now the left is turning on him, too. He's been just like a middle management nothing that for the most part, people can fully see through. He also had a lot to do with the hiding of the Pakistani rape gang. So he's on his way out one way or another. He's either not radical enough for the left or he's just too transparently nothing for the right. So he's done. The media portion we discuss all the time. I mean, I think this again represents to see Elon showing up with Tommy Robinson, who you're right, has been kicked out of every mainstream institution in your country. Piers Morgan won't even have him on his show. I had Tommy on my show in 2016. We were supposed to have him on yesterday, but subsequently, because there was that was such a huge event, he had to postpone because he's doing a lot of media now. But this is a guy who, he's not racist. He's fighting for his country. I don't know all of his political beliefs, but there's just simply no reason to think that he wants anything much more grand than Britain for British people to have some values that were consistent with what your country had for quite literally thousands of years. I don't think there's a racial component to that per se, but sometimes there's different cultures are different, and let's just leave that there. And then the final question that you asked was about the future of the UK. That's the first time I've seen anything out of the UK in the last 10 years that gave me any hope for your country. I've been to the UK probably once a year for the last 10 years, usually just London area, Oxford, Cambridge, that kind of thing. And every single time it seems worse, but not only does it seem worse, it seems like the hope is gone. And Carl Benjamin, who you guys might know, he goes by the name of Sargon of Akkad on YouTube, or he used to go by that when he became real famous, but now Carl Benjamin. He tweeted out something like a year ago that I thought was really interesting. He's like, if you walk around London, you don't see any real Brits anymore. You see a lot of Islamists and whatever. He said, if you want to find real Brits, they're all in the pub at 11 a.m. And it's like, well, that is a problem on multiple levels. You don't see the people you're supposed to see on the street, and the people who might defend your country are actually getting drunk because they know the party's over. So the fact that there were some estimates of about 2 million people out there is an unbelievably inspiring sign. And having Elon involved, which we know how integral he was to getting Trump reelected, maybe there is a little hope across the pond.
I'm so glad you said it that way, Dave, too, because I saw the video. And Russell, I kept Googling, looking for more, because I'm like, is this really happening? Is it really happening there? And is it happening for these reasons? I think so often over the last couple of years, I'm like, gosh, what is going on over there with, expressing disappointment? Why do you think, because I don't know enough about the history, I've only been there once, unfortunately, but why do you think that, I hate to use that phrase turning point again, but when's the last time we saw that many people in the streets in London peacefully doing what they were doing, marching and listening and seemingly caring so much? Why was this the moment?
Well, also marching for their country. I think that's the distinction, because London has marches every week. They're just not for London or for Britain. And
Yes.
this was wildly different.
Yes.
The last march of that scale was when Tony Blair took Britain into the Iraq War erroneously and deceitfully. And I feel that when you get a mass demonstration of that scale, particularly one that is at odds with the agenda of the media, of course, as you're saying, Sage, like they're trying to minimize, obfuscate, tell a different story about it, they're racist. You know, at its core, it seems it's anti-migration. That's a significant part of Tommy Robinson's focus. But that in itself, as I said when I spoke to him, I said that the migration issue is likely a symptom of an expression of power from elsewhere, because migrants aren't by themselves, by definition, a powerful group. They may be the beneficiaries of power, but what would be the reason for that? And what I'm starting to sort of feel, and I'm like really torn, both of you, and if I'm forgive me being absolutely transparent as best as I can be for a moment. Like in the last week, I felt like exhausted. I felt it a bit on the day even prior to Charlie's murder. I felt like, and we've actually talked about it offline before. It's like, I don't know how much longer I can keep on doing this, talking about the stuff, the endless cycle, the churn, things that you don't know anything about, things you don't understand but have to commentate on, things that just seem cyclical and bewildering and heartbreaking and awful and just generate more and more hatred. This, though, this sort of set of events makes me start to understand that the real core problem is control of information has been lost. And maybe COVID and that period was an attempt to assert a level of authoritarianism that was required going forward to legitimize censorship. Now, if you can mobilize that many people without legacy media support, with legacy media lying about it, denying it, even if it's not perfect in its motivations, you can see that the real problem, and this might be the reason Charlie Kirk ends up getting murdered one way or another, the reason that other people gets murdered, and perhaps even including myself, is because information can't be sufficiently controlled. And because of that, you have to find ways of shutting down alternative voices and legitimizing centralized control. When if the medium is the message must be this: decentralize, maximize power of the individual, maximize power of the community, maximize power of the state, maximize power of the nation, if that is a true reflection of the people in that nation. And obviously Britain have pushed its population to a tipping point, because that ain't normal for Britain, certainly, as you say, Dave, not motivated by patriotism. So I felt like kind of heartened by it, even though I'm still, really confused overall by just what's been going on.
All that begins as individuals, doesn't it? And by each of us using our voices and looking in the mirror, because it is exhausting and you want to run away sometimes, but then you kind of are part of the problem. And like I tried to point out earlier, then you're only allowing one group, one thought to permeate everything. And I do also think it's not just your everyday people, neighbors. It is people who are in Hollywood, where we know it's a much higher percentage who actually believe in pretty conservative values, at least middle of the road, but have been quiet and silent and taken that paycheck. It is athletes who I know for a fact, all of us know for a fact, have quite often very conservative views, but have stayed silent. And so if the people who are the most comfortable financially, and with the biggest platforms are choosing to stay silent, why would the quote unquote little people have the courage to speak up? So I do think we all have to take that responsibility, and especially those with platforms and who don't have as much to risk financially. It is looking in the mirror, and it is going back to Russell. Like you can't go anywhere. You can't get quiet. You can't run away. Like, we need your voice, and you have been so raw and so vulnerable with so many things, very personal things. And in particular, your faith now, where when you see so many people turning to God and you see the effect, like, we need you now more than ever, actually.
If I can pile on, if Russell's ego can deal with it for a moment, let me just say two things on that, and then we'll kick it to Sage. Russell, you just said the thing about radical transparency, and that this can grind us all down and everything else. Yeah, it can. And that's why I've been enjoying doing this with you guys so much. I didn't know it when I was originally sort of came up with the idea for the show. It was just like, I love Sage and I love Russell, and we'll bring in some other people and it'll be kind of fun. But I think what we've all learned while doing this is there's been something where this is, in some sense, this is like therapy for us to be able to go out and do the other job that we do all week. And that's why it's been really nice because, yeah, there are moments when you can get up and you're like, man, the war is still here. But to that point, about a year ago, I was under like endless assault from the media, from like a million things, and had all these people turning on me and all this stuff. And I didn't know who to turn to exactly. I probably could, I'm sure I was texting you guys, but I called Jordan Peterson, he's at the top of my, you call in the emergency thing. And I said to him, I was like, Jordan, there's a part of me that's just like, just get out now. Just, you did it. It's time to go and just disappear. And what he said to me was, he's like, Dave, there's a war and you can try to hide in Bora Bora, but the war will still come to you. There's no end to this. So to whatever extent we all play a role in it, it's like, you can't really hide from it. And especially we're all parents now. And Russell, you got a son who's younger than my guys. And it's like, so Russell Brand dips out because it's painful to do this, or we get hate or whatever it might be. Well, then we've just acquiesced the room to make the world worse for our kids. And I simply won't do that. So I'm proud to be in the fight with you guys.
And we have to go even deeper and ask why. Why are we in these roles? To have a little bit of a voice, to have a platform. Why are we here? Okay, yes. Had some success, financial success, fame, fortune, all the things. And I think we all know now it's much bigger than that. So when the going gets tough, even though I have felt pressure on my chest over the last week too, like, why? And let's just run away. Let's just go, I'll take less in my life. Like, to me, it's so much bigger. Why are we here? Why has God put us in these positions to speak up? So we all have choices to make. And I think listen, from a security perspective, I talked about that earlier. When this airs on Friday, I was scheduled to be on a stage with Charlie and Erica. And I don't know. They're still going to have the event at a church in Tennessee. We don't know what that looks like. I'm certainly changing my message that I was going to have in my speech, and I was going to be on a panel with the two of them. Like I said, my kids are like, Mom, don't. And I got all emotional. I'm not going to do it now. But like, look what they gave up. Look what he gave up. Look what Erica gave up and is going to continue. She's going to be front and center. So I feel like it's our duty because of this gift that we've been given.
They tried to kill Donald Trump and he was back out there the next day, right?
Yeah.
So what are we doing?
Yeah, I do believe we have no choice, and maybe we just alter the way we do it. I know certainly to be extra careful to try to lead with empathy and kindness. I also, as we reflect here and always, I think forever will with Charlie, the legacy, it's really endless. And one thing that I said to him the last time I saw him, it was in Scottsdale in May, and I was just on stage with him, and it was at a church, and it's just a conversation back and forth. I was so honored that he had asked me to come. And I brought my daughter Quinn with me, who's my oldest, and she's 23. And she's the one for years. She's like, Mom, this Charlie Kirk guy, And I said, guess what? She had just graduated from college like 2 weeks before. And I'm like, you need to come with me. I want you to meet him. I want you to shake his hand. I'm so glad that I did that now. And she is even the one that said, he changed this country. Like, he changed the election. And it's something that I spoke about a week ago on Wednesday, right after we got the news that he died. It was on Fox News. Take a look. Charlie Kirk is one of the strongest, bravest people that I know. He has, on a personal level, encouraged me so much to not be afraid to wear this cross like I used to be. He's taught me so much about God and faith and doing the right thing even when it's hard. Charlie Kirk is changing this country, certainly changed the election. I looked at some of the numbers earlier, and the Democrats lost 20% of that vote, 18 to 29. I've said from day one, it's because of Charlie Kirk. I have 3 college-age kids, as you know, Will, and Charlie Kirk is the reason why they began to care and dig a little deeper and try to understand what's going on in this country, because he encouraged thought and then came with facts. And unfortunately, it seems as if when people realize they're losing in many ways, they get desperate and they resort to violence in evil ways. And that is what we are witnessing. We witnessed July 13th last year with President Trump and Butler, and we're witnessing again today. And I'm devastated and heartbroken for him, for Erica, for his two beautiful children, and for this country that we've gotten to this point. As you guys could see, the lower third there, that was when we thought he was still alive. And the second I hung up from that Zoom with the Will Cain show is when the news broke. So I would love your thoughts on the impact that you believe he had last November leading up to the election, and how that continues to carry out. And I know it's speculation. We're guessing, we're maybe hoping that the impact continues. But I don't know that we fully comprehend how much he did to help Donald Trump get elected.
Oh, I don't know that we comprehend it. And I think as far as going forward, I think there's no way to comprehend it. I think now, to your point earlier, there is such a renewal in this country that is going to be both spiritual and political and cultural and all of those things. And of course, there'll be the counter movements to all of that. But I think he has woken something up amongst the people. He really was one of the good ones, and maybe in some sense didn't get the credit, like the day-to-day credit. Like he wasn't as famous as Tucker per se, or as Ben Shapiro or some of these other guys, but really was on the ground affecting young people more than anybody else. And, I used to do those college events with him, and, we'd have the bomb threats and the fire alarms pulled and people throw things at us and all of the stuff. But he was never ever afraid. And I'll just tell you one other thing, because I mentioned it on my show the other day, little private thing about Charlie. Charlie opened up for me at my last book tour in Arizona, and he was in crippling back pain. People don't realize how tall Charlie was. He was a great basketball player. I just saw Sage. Have you seen any of the video of him playing ball in high school? Oh, he could shoot. He really could shoot. I'll try to find it for you. He was quite a player. But Charlie was really tall. I think he was probably about 6'5", maybe. And he had crippling back pain, as a lot of tall people do. And the day of my book tour, he was supposed to open for me, and he called me in the morning. He said, "Dave, I don't know that I can get out of bed. Like, I'm really laid up right now." He said, "I will do everything I can, but I just don't know if I can do it." And we didn't know until showtime. And about 5 minutes before he showed up, he was literally laying on the floor in the green room because he couldn't sit on the sofa. He goes up, gives a beautiful, 10-minute talk about our relationship and everything else. And then he says, "Dave, I'd love to stay." And people wanted him to stay, obviously, to say hi and chat and all that. He said, "But I just can't. I'm in so much pain." And he would not even take money. He would not take money to do it. He was in crippling pain, didn't have to show up, and wouldn't take a dime to do it. So that's the Charlie I know. That's the Charlie that I hope the spirit that I hope will continue to run throughout the country.
I feel like, to the question of how effective was he politically, I think extremely. And I feel like what you said, Dave, about that, I didn't really think about that kind of thing. What I was aware of before was, I thought of the thing of going to colleges as being like a kind of provocateur. You're going where all of the wokeness prevails and getting amongst it. And I suppose because my background is more entertainment than politics, that's how I would frame that. I'd see it more like Jackass than, sort of William Buckley. But
there was some element. That evolved, because when we did it at first, it was definitely more like flamethrower, fight the woke, over the top, we're going to mock you guys, even though it was thoughtful too in the way we do things. But it was more of that. It evolved into the thing that he turned it into, which was like the full-on debate situation.
Yeah, and and I think that, that is meeting people where they're at, and people were obviously convinced. And in a sense, this is somewhat more typical, is it takes someone's death to understand what their impact is. I said to someone, like someone in Britain was asking about, like, who is Charlie Kirk? We never heard of him. And I goes, his death I said, it's like the death of Diana for the conservative right, that he somehow must have encapsulated something that wasn't entirely expressed, because the outpouring of grief and subsequent reaction and even the derision indicates that in that atom when it was split, the energy released shows you something, a truth that was not available previously. That he was, I suppose, we're in a time of, as you say, renewal and revival, and much of that was packed in. You don't even, if you think about it, I didn't think of him as being young. I didn't think of Charlie Kirk as young. He's like an old young person, isn't it? Great, big, long Nephilim 31-year-old. Like when I first met him at that RNC, and like I've just become Christian, like a couple of months, I'm all bewildered. And I was reading, like I read the Bible in 1 year. And so I was in the book of Romans. And he was like, so what are you asking me about my Christianity? And I'm like, yeah, I'm in the book of Romans. He's like, well, that's the Constitution. That's the Christian Constitution. And I was like, oh, like thought about that when I was reading it and stuff. And so like, it wasn't evident and obvious. And think of it, ain't that long ago that South Park did that thing of making him like Cartman and stuff. Like it's what I suppose is that, and you've copped for it there, Dave, that he was involved in the provocateur aspect of discourse and dialectic. But the grief is, like sort of for a Christian and for a father.
Well, guys, I have a feeling we could probably have just done a 24-hour live stream and sat here and done this cathartic thing together endlessly. We will continue to do it. I actually have to jump because in a minute, to continue with our spiritual theme, next week is Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, and I have Rabbi David Wolpe on. We thought it would be good to have him on to talk about that, also to the backdrop of everything we've talked about here. I thank you, my friends. We will continue.